Attention, my gorgeous listeners. All my new interviews will be on a new podcast feed called This Football Life. So please subscribe to my new podcast and listen to this interview on that podcast feed. If you like the Football Autobiography Show, I promise you'll like that one too. So I repeat one more time. The Football Autobiography Show is now This Football Life and has a new feed. So on whatever podcast app you're listening to this episode, please search for This Football Life and subscribe, and you can hear this entire interview there. Thanks. Welcome to This Football Life, the show that gives you intimate, in-depth interviews with football's most interesting players, coaches, backroom staff, and executives. That's right, we touch them all, from players like Bruce Grobbelaar to executives like Martin Edwards, the ex-owner of Manchester United. Walk a mile in their shoes and see the game through their eyes. I'm your host, Josh Schneider-Weiler, and it is such a pleasure to be with you all. I couldn't be more thrilled to bring this show to you, the fans. So, our first guest today is Bruce Grobbelaar. Grobbelaar was famously the Liverpool goalkeeper between 1981 and 1994, where he won 19 trophies in 13 years. In that Liverpool dynasty, he was a constant presence between the posts, making 627 appearances, good for 9th on the all-time list. He is best known for his colorful in-game antics, like walking on his hands and swinging on the crossbar, and his eccentric personality. Despite his unflappable optimism and exuberance, he experienced remarkable loss throughout his career and life. Present at the Heysel and Hillsborough disasters, he was witness to two of the biggest tragedies in football history. And before that, before his very eyes. He was also at the center of a match-fixing scandal in the 1990s while he was at Southampton. In his time, he's had to overcome one obstacle after another. Part soldier, part goalkeeper, part jester. Today we dive into the incredible life of Bruce Grobbelaar. Well, I'm so happy to have Bruce Grobbelaar here on the show. Bruce, how are you doing today?
Not bad, Josh, and how are you?
I'm doing excellent. Before we get into your decorated career at Liverpool, I want to talk about your upbringing in Zimbabwe, or what was known then as Rhodesia. Can you describe your childhood and the area you grew up in?
Yes, my parents came from South Africa when I was 2 months old, and we went and we lived in a place called Sonoya, now called Chinhoyi. Railway village, town, and a farming town. From there, my parents moved to Salisbury, which is the capital of Rhodesia at the time, and we lived in a little flat, a 2-bedroom flat on Baker Avenue, until I was around about 7. From there, we moved out into the country, a little place called Balancing Rocks, quite a long way out, where we had a house and about a couple of acres. And it was the time when my father decided that he was going to go off somewhere else. And my mother came back to town with my sister and myself. And we lived in a little place, again, on Baker Avenue, and then into Livingston Avenue, which is a little area near the school that I was going to. I grew up with my mother. She put us through school, 3 children through school. When my father moved to a place out in the east, in Yazura. And that is where I ran away to. I ran away there when I was 11 to my father. And it was 11 o'clock at night, and I got onto an African bus, which is all Africans, blacks. And then there was this little 11-year-old, 11-year-old jumped in on the bus. And when I got to my father, he let me sleep for a couple of hours. When he went to work, he woke me up at 6 o'clock in the morning, took me outside and beat me with a hose pipe. And he told me one thing, and so this will always resonate with myself. Never, ever do that to your mother again, because she brought you into this world, and you should actually respect her better than you have now. And so I was there for about 3 months, and I was shipped back to my mother. And yeah, that is where I learned my football, and I carried on schooling until I was finished school, and whilst I was playing professional football whilst at school. When I finished school, I went into the army for 2 years and did military service, saw active service. And when I came out of there, I went straight down to South Africa to start my soccer career.
So why did you run away at the age of 11?
Well, why did I run away? Let's put it this way. You're living with your mum, and your mum is one person, a man in her life that you didn't like, and you'd rather go and live with your father than live with this man telling you what to do. So I made a decision at that age to run away to my father, which was, not the smartest thing to do, because he gave me one reason not to go, and that was never to do that to your mother, which is true. Your mother brought you into this world, and so you should actually give her a little bit more credit than I did at that age. And
when you eventually did go back, what was her reaction? Was she?
Well, she was no longer with that man, so I was very happy. So I went back to my mother, and it took my mother a long time to get to a comfortable position with another man. Thankfully, she did. Well, by the time I was 14, and she married that person, and he became my stepfather. And a very, very nice man he was too.
I understand that when you were younger, obviously you were very much into football, but you were into other sports, and you even were offered a scholarship to play baseball in the United States. So why did you play football, and do you think that you might have had a professional career in baseball?
I don't. I have got no inkling if I would have been able to pursue my baseball career, because in baseball you have to be exceptionally good. I was at that time the best in Southern Rhodesia at pitching and at batting. But when we grew up, all African boys will play all the sports. So in the summer I played baseball and cricket. In the winter I played rugby and football. In the summer I swam, I dived. In the winter I did cross country and athletics and tennis, and we did everything. We made sure that we became sportsmen. And if you had a recreational club, some youngsters used to go play golf, like Nicky Price, and so they went and did that recreation on the weekend. To get to a golf club, you had to have a little bit more money, so I never played golf until I came out of the army, and that was it. Everybody in Rhodesia at that time, of Southern Africa or South Africa, used to play every sport he could, because your parents gave you time to go outside. There's hardly any rain, so your alarm clock in the evenings was when the street lights went on. When the street lights went on, that's the time that you get home, and that's the time you have your bath and your dinner, and then you do your homework, go to bed. But it was just a fantastic upbringing, a fabulous upbringing that we had in Africa. Yes, we were all very, very good. I played cricket for my country, baseball for my country. I swam for my province. And yes, it was just fantastic. I played rugby for my province as well. I could have played rugby for my country, but when I signed my first contract at 14, it deemed that I could not play any contact sport, which rugby was. So I had to stop the rugby.
I mean, it sounds like you were just an incredible athlete, and you were around a lot of incredible athletes at the time. When you were in that time in the 70s, as I understand it, in Rhodesia, it was quite segregated between the black population and the white population. I read that your first team, the Highlanders, were a predominantly black team, and that was kind of a new dynamic for you. Can you kind of explain that?
Yes. Well, you must understand that Rhodesia is not the same as South Africa, where South Africa practiced apartheid, keeping blacks away from whites. In Rhodesia, it was segregated to a minimum, where yes, blacks and whites could get on the same bus, but after dark we could not mix. If you know what I mean. After dark, the Africans used to go back to the blacks used to go back to their townships, which was segregated by a river, and the whites used to go stay in the suburbs of Salisbury and Bulawayo. So the team that I first started was an all-white side, and there were two leagues in Rhodesia at the time, a black league and a white league. The white league, this team that I played for, Salisbury Callies, won that league numerous times. So they thought, well, let's try our skills and let's play against the Africans, who had better skills, and it was a better league actually. So they went into the league, and it was a unique affair because we started in Salisbury. We were the only white side in Salisbury, and then in Bulawayo there was a white side that went into the league there. So we started up this new revolution of having one league, trying to get all the teams into one league, black and whites playing against each other, because that is what sport is about. Try and show your skills off against a better opponent. When I left Salisbury Callies, they loaned me to Matabeleland Highlanders. And yes, for the first 2 weeks, I was riding my bike to the township across the stream, and nothing was said. There were no policemen that stopped me or anything. On the third week, when I rode my bike, I got to the stream, there was a policeman there, and he said, "You can't go in there, it's dangerous." So I asked him why. "Excuse me, I've been going here for 2 weeks." He says, "What, you've been riding in there for 2 weeks, twice a week?" I said, "Yes." So he followed me. And when he followed me across the bridge, all the little Africans were running, "Hello, jungle man, how are you?" and running after me. And I had a whole entourage. When he saw that, he turned the car around and he went home. Because he thought, well, they know him, so he let me in. Otherwise, I was a white boy going into a black township at the age of 15. You can imagine what a white policeman would have thought. Hey, this guy's crazy.
Yeah, no, I bet he must have been beside himself.
So he actually came to one of the games on the weekend, saw that there were two white players playing for Matabeleland Highlanders, and we came in and out together in a vehicle. So he was quite happy. When we won, we were heroes. If we lost, if we drew, we were okay. If we lost, I was a goalkeeper, and they don't really take to you letting goals in, and you're the only white goalkeeper. You know what I mean? So I had to be very, very good and very competent or either had to get out of there as quick as I could.
Yeah, it really put the pressure on you at a young age. Yeah. Speaking of pressure, so soon after you signed up for 2 years in the Rhodesian National Guard and ended up fighting in the Bush War. Can you just explain how you ended up in the Army and kind of what your role was in it?
Well, we went. Everybody my age was going to go into the army anyway for conscription. So they had my name down already. I was at the end of the season that I played with Adebayo and Highlanders. I found out that Salisbury Tallies had sold me to another African side in Salisbury. So I went up there, and I was only there for 6 weeks. I didn't like it. I told the manager, a white Scotsman, Jack Neger, that he can take his team and stick it where the sun don't shine. And he turned around to me and he said, well, you'll never play football again because I've got your contract for 2 years. So I went down to Bulawayo, and my mother said to me, this was on a Wednesday. I got there on a Wednesday morning, and she looked at me and said, what are you doing here? I said, I've packed in my job. She said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go to South Africa. She said, no, you're not. You're going to the barracks. She took me to the barracks that afternoon, 2 o'clock. We went to the barracks in Brady Barracks, and to see when my name was coming up for call-up. And we asked him, when is my name coming up? And he said, oh, it will be in 6 months, sorry. I looked at my mother. I said, 6 months? I'll be in Durban surfing because I'm going down to Durban now for sure. He turned to my mother and said, there is one going in tomorrow morning. And she made me sign that day. And I went in the very, very next day in July. Off I was, about the 7th of July. Boom, into the army. And yeah.
Why did she make you go into the army immediately?
Because had I gone away to South Africa, I would have been conscripted in the South African army, and then therefore she would have no control where, and knowing where I was. So she knew that I would be coming back, and my first initial training was in Bulawayo area. It was in Llewellyn Barracks, about 30 k's outside of Bulawayo. That was where the army camp initially, your first phase was. So I was there for 6 weeks. So I trained there, and I could get home on weekends occasionally. As it happened, I was out every weekend because I made sure that the sportsmen in the call-up who played sport could get out. The first weekend I found out that there were so many rugby players in our intake. So the very next, the Monday coming back into training, I went to the major and I said to him, listen, we need a rugby team. We've got so many good rugby players, and I think Llewellyn Barracks needs a rugby team, and I've got a game for this weekend if you want. So we got this rugby team together. We played the Milton at Hartleyvale that very next weekend, so we were out on the weekend, you see. We got a weekend pass. And then the next weekend we played against Queens. And then next weekend we played Old Miltonians. So for 3 weeks out of the 6 weeks there, we were playing rugby. On the fourth week we played a pickup, Bulawayo pickup side. So that was 5. The fifth and 6 weeks, baseball came into it, and I had a baseball team by that time. So we got out of the first phase army every weekend except the first one.
That's really clever. You were like the sports director of the army.
Well, I knew that we had a good major who was a cross-country runner, and he liked baseball, so he was there. And we had a good sergeant major. Our colour sergeant major was a rugby player, so he made sure that he got into the rugby team. So, and we had the Springbok winger Ray Mort also in there, and Kevin Schlachter, Rhodesian's prop forward. So we had very, very good players.
And so after you had this basic training, what did you do next?
No, we were billeted out. We had to go on border control, where we were given an area to guard the border. Just walk up and down the border and say hello to the Portuguese next door, the Mozambicans, and swap cigarettes for chocolates. They had good chocolates. We had good cigarettes, so we swapped the cigarettes for the chocolates until Christmas 1975. We were in an area around the school, and Christmas Eve we were mortared. after swapping cigarettes and chocolates with him, all we heard at night was doop, 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 boom, So we dug in, we made sandbags and made sure we had bunkers that they couldn't kill us. We had only one injury that day. That was just a bit of shrapnel going to each fella's leg. He survived. So, there were no casualties. And that is when our war started, on Christmas in 1975. We then learned that there was a lot more insurgents coming across. We had to lay ambush, and we got into a little bit of a skirmish with the freedom fighters, if I may say so, because if I say guerrillas and terrorists, I'll get into trouble again. So the freedom fighters from Rhodesia were coming in, and we were trying to stop them because they were just terrorizing their own kind in Rhodesia, trying to get them switched over and support them. So that was it. That happened for about a year, and then our captain, he decided that our unit, our company, was so good that we could actually be mobile at any one time. So 20 of us went for tracking courses, 20 went for basic first aid and surgery, basic surgery techniques, and then 20 were just trained for machine gun fire and radio. And that we became a mobile unit where 4 of you get into a helicopter, so that's you as a tracker, and a stick leader would take another one who's a tracker in case you get shot. He can carry on with a machine gunner and